There is a certain kind of quiet in the Montana mountains that most people never hear in their entire lives. It is not silence. Silence is empty, hollow, the absence of something. This is different. This is the sound of the world settling into itself. Pine needles whispering secrets to the wind 100 feet above the river. The low rumble of water sliding over ancient stone. The gentle groan of old timber contracting under the morning cold. That quiet was home. It was the reason I bought this land nearly 2 decades ago, and the reason I built on it with my own hands. One board, one paycheck, one long stubborn year at a time. For 18 years, nobody bothered me. Nobody questioned my bridge. Nobody tried to stake a claim to the ground beneath my boots. Until that morning. I had been gone 4 days, just four, visiting an old friend in Helena, stocking up on supplies, enjoying the kind of conversation you can only have with someone who knew you before your beard turned grey and your knees started predicting the weather. When I drove back along the dirt road and stepped out of my truck, the air felt wrong. Cold, yes, but something else. Sharp. Metallic. The smell of fresh-cut steel and recently poured concrete, scents that had no business existing this far from civilization. I walked forward slowly, boots cracking through the frost, and then I saw it. Chains, thick black chains pulled tight across the mouth of my bridge, bolted straight into the concrete slab like someone had claimed it in the dead of night while I slept 100 miles away. A bright aluminium sign hung from the center, swinging slightly in the wind. HOA property, access revoked. My breath left me, not in fear, not in panic, in disbelief. I was not part of a homeowners association. Never had been, never would be. My land sat 2 miles north of the nearest development, far from their trimmed lawns and matching mailboxes and rules about what color you could paint your shutters. And yet here they were, planting their flag like conquistadors who had discovered a new continent. I crouched beside the chains and touched the bolt head, still warm. Whoever had done this had not been gone long. I scanned the tree line on instinct. Years of living alone in the wilderness teach you to look for what does not belong. That is when I saw it. A tiny glint of light from inside a patch of brush, a reflection that should not exist in a place where nothing man-made should be hiding. I pushed the branches aside and found a camera, a little black square aimed directly at my bridge, wired into a battery pack hidden under dead leaves. Motion activated, night vision capable. Someone had not just blocked my access. They were watching to see what I would do about it. That was when the quiet changed. It no longer felt peaceful. It felt watched. I stood up, jaw tight, and stared at the river flowing beneath the blocked path. This was not a mistake. This was not some bureaucratic error or overzealous volunteer misreading a map. This was a move. The first move in a game I had not agreed to play. My truck could not cross, not with the chains pulled taut enough to stop a tank. So I backed up along the dirt road, parked on the far side, and took the long trail through the woods. It was not a hard hike under normal circumstances, but the weight of anger made every step heavier. By the time I reached my porch, the Montana air felt thinner, as if the land itself sensed something had been disturbed. Inside, I hung up my coat and poured a cup of coffee. The house felt different. Not unsafe exactly, but unsettled, as if someone had moved something in the bones of the place while I was gone. Something I could not quite identify, but could absolutely feel. On the kitchen table sat the envelope I had found in my mailbox. Plain white paper, cheap envelope, no stamp. Someone had hand-delivered it like a summons. Inside was a letter that read like a threat dressed up in bureaucratic language. Boundary reassessment. Unauthorized land usage. Payment required. I have seen bad paperwork in my life. I spent 4 decades as a structural engineer before I retired to this mountainside. I have read contracts designed to steal, permits designed to confuse, and reports designed to bury the truth under layers of jargon. But this letter was something else entirely. It read like someone who had watched too many legal dramas and decided they could write the script themselves. Still, I am a reasonable man. I believe in starting with the truth before swinging at the lies. I dialed the number printed at the bottom. It rang twice. A woman's voice answered, clipped and efficient. Riverside Tranquility Homeowners Association. I kept my voice even. My name is Garrett Kine. I received a notice stating my bridge encroaches on HOA land. I am calling to clear up what I am sure is a misunderstanding. Her tone sharpened immediately, the way certain people's voices change when they smell an opportunity to exercise authority. There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Kine. According to our updated boundary assessment, your structure is partially within Riverside Tranquility jurisdiction. I glanced out the window at the river, the same river that had marked my property line since the day I signed the deed. My bridge is on my land. Surveyed, stamped, inspected, and approved by the county. Your jurisdiction ends 2 miles south of here. A pause, not the kind where someone considers what you have said. The kind where they prepare something they have clearly rehearsed. Our maps supersede outdated documents. If you wish to dispute the charges, you may do so through the appropriate legal channels, but the board has voted. The fees stand. Let me see those maps. We do not release internal assessments to non-members. Non-members, meaning me, meaning the man whose bridge they had just chained shut in the middle of the night. I felt something settle in me then. Slow, heavy, inevitable. The first click of a storm door caught in the wind. All right. If that is the game you want to play, then we will play. Her voice brightened, cheerful as a retail clerk offering a discount. Payment is due within 10 days. Have a wonderful afternoon. And she hung up. No conversation, no courtesy, no proof. Only entitlement, backed by nothing but the echo of a woman who had no idea what kind of fight she had just started. When people lie, they rarely do it cleanly. There is always a wrinkle, a smudge, a corner peeling up where the truth tries to escape. The HOA's letter had plenty of peeling corners. I brought the papers to my desk and laid everything out flat. The boundary reassessment was a joke, missing every legal requirement a legitimate survey needs. No licensed surveyor signature, no proper coordinate notations, no reference to county records. But the attached map was what made the coffee in my stomach go sour. Glossy print, thick red X over my bridge. Property lines bent at impossible angles, as if someone had drawn them during a fever dream. A faint grey caption at the bottom reading HOA Zone, Revised Expansion Overlay. Expansion, there was that word, the quiet confession buried in official-looking graphics. But there was something stranger still. The coordinate grid did not match rural mapping standards. The watermark was stretched incorrectly. The survey seal was the wrong shape entirely. Someone had not just made a mistake, they had fabricated evidence, and they had done it badly. I sat back and exhaled through my teeth. Then another thought hit me, the camera. In the moment I found it, my brain had been too busy processing the shock of the chained bridge, the audacity of the sign, the sense of violation. I had not looked at the ground around it. I had been too focused on the glinting lens. Now I wanted evidence of my own. I grabbed my coat and followed the trail back down to where the camera had been hiding. The forest was quiet in a different way now. Quiet in the way that means every creature within 50 yards is listening. I crouched and pulled the camera free from the brush. Weatherproof housing, night vision lens, motion sensor. Someone had not just wanted to monitor the bridge, they wanted to monitor me at the bridge. I turned the camera over in my hand, feeling its cold weight. That was when I finally looked down. Fresh boot prints, size 10 or 11, deep tread pattern pressed firmly into the soft earth. Someone heavier than me, or at least someone who had not been trying to walk lightly. I followed the impressions with my eyes. They led from the roadside straight to where the camera had been hidden. The dirt was still damp, the edges of the prints still sharp. Whoever planted this device had done it recently. Hours ago, maybe less. A slow burn started behind my ribs. Not panic, not rage, something older, something steadier. The kind of resolve that comes from knowing you are right and knowing the other side does not care. I pocketed the camera and stood, looking across the valley toward riverside tranquility. The rooftops gleamed in the distance. Same color, same angles, same careful conformity. Little toy boxes stacked in orderly rows. Somewhere among them sat a person who thought they could push a man off his own land with nothing more than forged papers and a padlock. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I turned away from the river and climbed the trail back home. The air felt heavier, charged with something waiting to happen. Inside, I set the forged map on my desk and placed the camera beside it. Then I pulled out the SD card with a quiet click. Whatever was on this little chip could be the difference between suspicion and proof. But before I checked the footage, a caption at the bottom of the fake map caught my eye again. Expansion overlay. Overlay, meaning this document was based on something else, something internal, something they did not want outsiders seeing, and probably something someone had already leaked onto the internet because homeowners association boards love creating digital documents they have no business sharing. I powered on my computer and typed Riverside Tranquility HOA expansion overlay into the search bar. I expected nothing useful. What I found was a gift. 3 links down sat a file on a community cloud drive. Public. No password protection. Just sitting there like a trapdoor someone forgot to close. Riverside Tranquility, Phase 2 Planning Draft. Draft, meaning not final, meaning someone had uploaded it early, meaning somewhere someone had made an enormous mistake. I clicked. The document opened in all its self-important glory. 23 pages of corporate fonts, stock photos of smiling families walking golden retrievers, and phrases designed to obscure meaning rather than clarify it. Future Community Integration Corridor. River Adjacency Optimization. Shared Access Improvement Initiative. You could smell the overpriced consultants through the screen. I scrolled to the maps, and there it was. My land, my river bend, my bridge, sitting directly across a dashed red arrow labeled Preferred Northern Access Route Phase 2. I leaned in closer. The arrow pointed straight to my bridge, not near it, not adjacent, straight to it. The notes below read, current conditions, no established community access route, potential obstacle, private bridge owned by non-member landholder. Obstacle, that was what I was to them, an obstacle to be removed. Below that, one more line. Recommendation. Jurisdiction claim via boundary reassessment to secure northern ingress. There it was, the smoking gun. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not an overreach. This was not some volunteer making an honest mistake. This was strategy. They had laid it out like a blueprint for theft. I scrolled further. A section near the bottom had been highlighted, perhaps by whoever last viewed the file before it leaked. Projected benefits of northern access, reduced drive time for residents, emergency response shortcuts, connection to regional road system, expansion viability of lots 5166. Lots 51 through 66, new homes, new money, new construction. And to build them, they needed an entrance they could never afford to construct themselves, but one that already existed. My bridge. I sat back in my chair. Well, I said to the empty room, there is your motive. The file contained dates, signatures, draft histories, revision notes. These were not the fantasies of one obsessive president. This was a coordinated initiative. And in the revision notes, clear as morning, a damning line. Legal counsel recommends asserting claim over riparian buffer zone for jurisdiction expansion. Riparian, meaning riverbank, meaning the thin strip of unclaimed buffer land that sat between my property and the edge of theirs, meaning they were counting on confusion, hoping I would not know where my land ended and the ambiguity began. But here is what they did not know. I built my bridge with certified boundaries. I walked this land with surveyors before the first post was ever driven. I pored over plat maps until I could draw them from memory. They had picked the worst possible landowner to target, a man who knew the paperwork better than they ever would. I downloaded the Phase 2 file, saved it twice, and copied it to an external drive. Then I printed the key pages and laid them out beside the forged HOA map. 2 documents, one fabricated, one leaked, and they matched just enough to incriminate everyone involved. I reached for my phone and dialed my lawyer in Missler. "Mitchell," I said when he answered, "we have a project." I woke before sunrise the next morning with a knot in my stomach. Not fear exactly. Instinct. The kind of instinct a man earns after enough years dealing with people who smile while reaching for the knife behind their back. I brewed coffee, stepped outside, and followed the trail toward the river. The air was colder than the day before, sharp enough to sting the inside of my nose. The kind of cold that keeps you alert even when your body wants rest. When the trees finally opened and the bridge came into view, I stopped. They had escalated. The chains were still there, but now a full steel barricade stood across the mouth of my bridge. 4-inch posts drilled deep into the concrete, braced with galvanized bars, wrapped 3 times over with heavy industrial chain, locked with a padlock the size of my fist. A new sign dangled from the center. Emergency safety closure. Structural instability detected. Authorized by engineer Leonard Briggs. Briggs, a name that meant nothing to me then. But soon I would learn he was not an engineer at all. Not anymore. Not legally. His license had been revoked 5 years prior for falsifying soil reports on a highway project. But in that moment, all I saw was a forged signature being used to cut me off from the rest of the world. I set my coffee on a rock and stepped closer, laying my palm against the cold steel. The metal bit into my skin, cold enough to leave marks. This barricade had been installed under cover of darkness, left to sit through the long night like a sentry with no pulse. A message: you are not going anywhere. A slow breath pushed out of me. This was not vandalism by teenagers looking for thrills. This was a calculated blockade, designed to isolate me, pressure me, make me bend. But I do not bend, not for bullies, and certainly not for paperwork tyrants with delusions of conquest. I pulled out my phone and called the county sheriff. Deputy Thurman arrived 25 minutes later, a young man with the earnest manner of someone who still believed disputes could be solved through calm conversation. He took one look at the barricade and let out a low whistle. "That yours?" "No," I said, "but everything behind it is." I handed him my paperwork, permits, county surveys, engineering approvals, the entire stack. He read through them slowly, nodding. "This all looks solid. You did everything by the book." Then cut the chain. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "I cannot do that, Mr. Kine." "Why not? This is my bridge on my land." He pointed at the sign. "Because we received that order too. Emergency safety closure. If I cut this and the bridge collapses, the liability comes down on the department." "You really believe my bridge is unstable?" "That is not the issue," he said gently. "The issue is a certified engineer signed that closure." I almost laughed. Certified, right. He looked genuinely conflicted, caught between what he could see with his own eyes and the official paperwork someone had placed in front of him. "File for an injunction," he said quietly. "It is your best route. Until then, my hands are tied." I nodded. It was not his fault. He had been handed a stack of lies dressed up as authority, and he did not have the tools to tell the difference. He headed back to his cruiser. I did not follow. Instead, I took the long way home, the steep game trail that crawls up the backside of my property, through dense brush and over roots slick with frost. Halfway up, my boots slipped on a hidden rock. My knee slammed into jagged stone with enough force to make stars burst behind my eyes. I cursed the ground, the HOA, the universe. Then I pushed myself upright and limped the rest of the way, pain throbbing with every step. By the time my porch came into view, my knee had swollen enough to press against the denim of my jeans. That injury would later become part of my medical file. Documented. photographed, another nail in the HOA's coffin. I looked back toward the river. Through the trees, I could just make out the silver barricade glinting in the rising sun. They had not just blocked my bridge, they had endangered my life, and that crossed a line even they could not pretend away. I took a deep breath and said what I knew to be true. It was time to fight back. Pain sharpens the mind in unexpected ways. By the time I lowered myself into my chair, my knee had swollen enough to restrict movement, the kind of deep throb that pulses with each heartbeat. But pain, I have learned, is just information. And this information said I had documentation now, physical evidence, a direct line between their barricade and my injury. I drove to the clinic in town, taking the long route around my blocked access point. Every step from the parking lot to the door hurt, and every step hardened something inside me. The nurse asked how I injured myself. I told her the truth. I slipped on a frost-covered trail because my only legal access home was blocked by an illegal barricade. The doctor documented everything: contusion, swelling, range of motion restriction. X-rays confirmed soft tissue damage but no fracture. I left with a brace, prescriptions, and a stack of medical records thick enough to make any personal injury lawyer smile. Back in my truck, I called Mitchell Harper, my attorney. He answered on the second ring. "Garrett, been a while. Wish this was a friendly call." I laid everything out. The chains, the forged safety order, the fake engineer, the new barricade, my fall, my injury. But when I told him about the expansion map I had found online, the one marking my bridge as a preferred access corridor, his tone changed entirely. "Send everything: photos, maps, medical records. And Garrett, do not talk to them, not until we move first." I drove to Bozeman next and walked into a GPS surveying office, one of the few in the state capable of producing sub-inch accuracy legal boundary scans. The technician recognized me. "You are the guy who built that concrete span over Black Row, right?" "That is me. Still standing strong." "It is. The only problem is a group of neighbors who think it should not be." He booked the earliest available field survey 2 days out. They would scan my entire property line, the riverbank, the bridge piers, everything. A legally certified map that nobody, not even an HOA with a taste for fiction, could argue with. When I got home, I limped into my office and laid everything out across my desk. Medical forms, forged maps, photos of the barricade, the HOA threat letter, and the SD card from the camera I had pulled from the brush. I slid the card into my computer. The files loaded slowly, one after another. Most clips were empty, just river and wind triggering the motion sensor. But two caught my attention. The first showed the camera being installed. The lens swung wildly for a few seconds before being secured, catching quick flashes of a reflective vest, a gloved hand, the edge of a tool pouch. No face visible, but enough to prove deliberate placement on my property. And in the audio, barely audible, a voice: "Hold it steady right here." The second clip showed silhouettes installing the barricade. Blurry figures moving with purpose, hauling metal, tightening chains. Enough to identify tools. Enough to match bootprints later if necessary. Enough to prove intent. I leaned back and exhaled through my nose. This was not some petty dispute about grass height or mailbox placement. This was trespassing, criminal interference, fraud, a coordinated attempt to force access across my land. They thought I would fold. They thought an older man living alone near a river would rather comply than fight. They thought wrong. I organized every document, every photo, every time-stamped file into a single binder. My case, my ammunition. Then I closed the cover and let the weight settle into my hands. The counterattack would begin tomorrow. Tonight, I prepared. The survey team arrived on schedule. 2 men in heavy jackets with GPS equipment strapped to their packs. The leader looked familiar, and when he got closer, I realized why. Milton Hughes. He had been one of my professors 30 years ago, the man who taught me load distribution and soil density before I ever signed my first engineering report. "You did not tell me you were this Garrett Kine," he said with a grin. "You are the one who helped me file the original topographic survey when I bought this land. Still have a copy, and it still matches the county archive." Milton and his partner Wayne, a retired state boundary specialist, spent the entire day scanning every square foot from my property line to the HOA edge, every coordinate, every marker, every historical overlay. By sundown, they had their result. Milton held up his tablet. "Garrett, your bridge is 100% on your land. No overlap whatsoever, not even an inch." Wayne added his own observation. "And the land the HOA keeps referencing, it is not even registered to them. It is an unclaimed natural easement, a buffer zone. They tried to assert control over something nobody owns." Mitchell arrived just as they were packing up their equipment. Milton looked at him. "You are the lawyer." "That is right. Tell your friend something for me." Milton tapped the forged survey documents I had shown him. They did not just use the wrong coordinate system. They used mapping conventions from the wrong decade entirely. Mitchell raised an eyebrow. "They did not even bother forging it well," Milton said. "This is amateur hour fraud." Mitchell nodded slowly. "This settles the first phase." "What is the second phase?" "Criminal referrals." I looked back at my bridge, solid against the evening sky, the river whispering beneath it like nothing had ever happened. I suppose they thought they could out-engineer an engineer. Mitchell picked up the stack of forged documents. They thought something much worse than that. They thought nobody would check their work. He slid the papers into his briefcase. "Tomorrow morning, a judge is going to check it." The courtroom was fuller than I expected, every bench occupied, some faces curious, some anxious, some clearly entertained by the spectacle about to unfold. A few reporters sat in the back with notebooks ready. The HOA president sat at the defense table, chin lifted, posture rigid, eyes hard. Her attorney looked considerably less confident, shifting papers with the nervous energy of someone who knows the foundation beneath him is crumbling. Mitchell leaned toward me. "Ready." "I have been ready since the day they chained my bridge." When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Mitchell began his opening statement measured and precise, laying out the case like a blueprint. He explained that this was not a simple property disagreement. This was a deliberate campaign of fraud, harassment, forgery, trespass, and sabotage, engineered and executed by the Riverside Tranquility HOA under the direction of its president. Forged engineering letters, fabricated maps, illegal safety notices, false environmental complaints. And his voice dropping slightly, a coordinated attempt to dismantle a structurally sound bridge on private land for the purpose of forcing access to support a housing development expansion. The HOA attorney responded with brittle confidence. Everything had been done in the interest of community safety. They believed the bridge was unsafe, possibly unlawful, potentially harmful to the environment. It might have sounded convincing if you had never seen what they had actually done. But then their client could not help herself. She leaned toward her microphone and added, "We only acted responsibly. We never damaged anything. We never touched his bridge." Mitchell smiled the way a hunter smiles when prey steps into the clearing. "To confirm," he said, "you are stating under oath that you never instructed anyone to physically interfere with Mr. Kine's bridge." "Absolutely not." Mitchell nodded as if he appreciated her certainty. Then he turned to the judge. "Your Honor, may we dim the lights?" The courtroom darkened. A video flickered onto the screen. Two men in reflective vests crouching at the base of my bridge. One loosening bolts, the other drilling into the guardrail, my calm voice narrating as I filmed. And then the audio that froze the room. "She paid us to do it. Cash. She said the bridge was illegal and she needed it gone before the county inspector came." Mitchell paused the video at the frame showing both workers clearly visible, their faces uncertain, their tools incriminating. Would you like to correct your statement? The room buzzed with whispers. The HOA president jerked forward in her seat, reaching for her attorney's arm, pulling away when he tried to restrain her. I do not know those men. Mitchell did not argue. He simply lifted an evidence bag containing a phone, the one deputies had seized during the arrests. Your Honor, these are text messages recovered from one of the workers. He read them aloud. Is it done yet? Make sure you remove the main support bolts so the structure fails completely. Cash is in the usual spot. Do not let him see anything. Do it before sunrise. If the sheriff asks, say it is HOA property. Stick to that. The defendant sagged in her chair. Her attorney closed his eyes. Mitchell moved next to the forged engineering reports, the ones bearing the signature of Leonard Briggs. Your Honor, Mr. Briggs lost his engineering license 5 years ago for submitting falsified soil tests. He is not legally permitted to sign engineering documents. Yet these letters were used by the HOA to justify condemning Mr. Kine's bridge. The defendant tried to interject, but her attorney whispered urgently for her to stop talking. She did not. That is not my fault. He told me he was licensed. Mitchell's response was perfectly timed. So you admit contacting Mr. Briggs for engineering work? Her mouth snapped shut, too late. The environmental testimony came next. The aquatic biologist stepped forward and systematically dismantled every claim the HOA had made. My bridge did not harm fish populations. It created beneficial microhabitats. The shade kept water temperatures stable. Juvenile fish used the calm areas beneath the structure as resting zones. And then she delivered the final blow. If anyone has damaged the riparian environment, it is the HOA itself. We documented illegal vegetation clearing on their side of the river, which has increased sediment runoff and degraded spawning habitat. She concluded with a statement that echoed through the silent courtroom. If the HOA had succeeded in removing that bridge, the river would be worse for it, not better. By the end, the defense attorney was no longer taking notes. He simply stared at the table in front of him. The judge delivered his verdict without ceremony. In all my years on the bench, I have never seen a homeowners association act with this level of deceit. You falsified documents. You interfered with private infrastructure. You endangered a homeowner. You attempted to manipulate government agencies using fabricated evidence. The HOA would pay $280,000 in damages, fees, and restitution. The president personally owed $75,000 in fines and was banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. The fraudulent engineer and 2 board members would face criminal investigation. The boundary survey was declared final and legally binding. And permanent injunctive protection was granted. The HOA could not interfere with my property again, ever. I nodded when the gavel fell. No smile, no celebration, just quiet, steady relief. Justice does not shout. It stands upright, speaks plainly, and lets the truth do the work. Snow began falling the week after the verdict. Soft at first, drifting through the treetops, then thickening into the heavy Montana snowfall that blankets the world in silence. My bridge stood exactly where it had always stood, strong as the day I poured the concrete, glistening under a thin sheet of early winter ice. No chains, no barricade, no surveillance cameras hidden in the brush. Just a bridge, my bridge, leading to my home. I walked out to it one morning, coffee steaming in the cold, breath fogging in the sharp air. The river rolled quietly beneath the forming ice, slow and steady, unchanged by everything that had happened above it. Nature does not care about human drama. It just keeps moving. For the first time in months, I was not listening for trouble. I was just listening. A pair of hikers came down the public trail behind me, bundled in thick jackets. One of them slowed, squinted, then grinned. Wait, are you that guy? The bridge guy? I raised an eyebrow. Saw the whole thing in the paper. That was wild. I gave a small laugh. I suppose that was me. He offered a thumbs up before jogging to catch his partner. I stood there watching them disappear along the river trail and realized something had shifted. People were not avoiding me anymore. They were not afraid of whispered threats or petty retaliation. The spell was broken. Fear only works when people believe you have power, and the HOA had none left. Mitchell called that afternoon with updates. 2 board members had resigned. Another was cooperating with investigators. The former president had sold her house at a loss and left the state. I did not celebrate. I did not wish her harm. I just felt finished. Some battles are not about revenge. They are about setting things right and letting the dust settle. A week later, I mixed a batch of concrete, hauled it to the bridge entrance, and set a post. When the base hardened, I bolted a solid steel frame to it and mounted a sign. Simple words, nothing fancy. This bridge is built on private land. It shall not pass to others. Below that, on a small bronze plate, I added something more personal. Dedicated to peaceful water, quiet mornings, and fish who mind their own business. A neighbor passed by while I was tightening the final bolt. He paused, read the sign, and let out a quiet laugh. That ought to settle it. It had better, I answered. That night I grilled a steak, poured a glass of the whiskey one of the former board members had anonymously mailed me, and sat on my porch while snow thickened across the valley. The bridge was visible through the dark, a quiet silhouette against the white, solid, untouched, exactly where it belonged. The war was over. The river had its calm back. And so did I.